happy that we have this here in cooperation also with our friends in the Colorado chapter. Peter Seal, board of directors of the Colorado chapter is here. I'm very happy that we've got Stu here, Stuart Fischbeck from Pinkerton. And he's actually the reason why we're doing this, because member of the Colorado chapter here, and we're always happy to reach out to all of the regions that we have here. Scott, we introduced you a little also, and we shared the news that we're so thankful to PKF Miller for your sponsorship here. You didn't know that before, now you know.
Sure thing. Glad to support.
Exactly. Hey, thank you so much. And again, it's really much appreciated, because your support enables us to provide those platforms for our members to mingle, to meet, and to communicate, and for us to do what we're doing. Mark Saxelby, hey, welcome as well, and also Norman. Good to have you back, and we all can't wait to be back in person. Since we're just a small group, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to skip the official presentation in terms of housekeeping, because we're only a few. So what we're going to do is we're going to mute everyone during Stuart's presentation, and you will be able to chat with everyone here. Just use the chat function down at the bottom. And Stuart, after your presentation, we've got plenty of time then actually to ask questions, get some answers, also get some additional insights, because you know a thing or two, because you've seen a thing or two. Yeah, I stole that one. I hope I don't get into trouble with another company that uses that catchphrase, but come on, sue me. I'm asking for it. Peter, thank you so much, Peter Seal, from Colorado chapter for joining us here. Do you want to say a few words? I mean, you introduced yourself in the Colorado chapter already, but I would like to give the floor to you once again.
Yeah, thank you, Mario. Just a very brief introduction. First time for me joining also the virtual business lunch. I've been originally from Germany. I moved to Colorado in '99, so it's been 22 years. Worked for 20 years for ThyssenKrupp, and just recently switched to another German company, a small company called Bäumer. Our company is active in logistics and distribution equipment and airport systems to handle suitcases in the airport. So the chances are, when you air travel again, that your checked bag is handled by some systems from our company. I'm personally working for the third division, which is actually material handling equipment for mines and cement plants, so long distance conveyors. I joined the GACC in October as a board member, so I'm a volunteer, I'm not an employee. And as I mentioned earlier, we are a somewhat smaller chapter, but we are really want to grow membership and also what we can offer for the members. And one of the newest members is Pinkerton Consulting. Also we are honored, and thanks Stuart for joining us today. And yeah, looking forward to learn more about Pinkerton.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Peter. Shall we hand it over to Stuart?
Yeah.
All right.
Very well. Thank you, Mario. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. All right. Let me find my share screen. Is that coming through okay?
Yeah, looking good.
Excellent. Well, as Peter and Mario mentioned, my name is Stu Fischbeck. I also moved to Colorado in '99, so I've been here for 22 years as well. Originally came from Texas. But I've been participating for a while with the GACC Colorado chapter, and had seen a number of sat in on a number of the other presentations. We had recently had a supply chain presentation. There's been some personnel issue presentations, and one thing that I noticed was not spoken about in this context was risk, and especially security risk, which is obviously what my company does. And so I thought this would be a really good topic to talk to people about. especially in these current, as the Chinese say, interesting times. So without further ado, I'll get started. Just a quick bit about me. I'm the director for Pinkerton. I cover the Denver area as well as most of the Great Plains states. I'm a chemical engineer by training. I entered the security business through the EH&S side of things. I hold a couple of professional certifications in security engineering. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and the last 11 have been in the security field. I have seen quite a few things. I've done this with industrial, as a part of industrial firms, as well as consulting for a whole bunch of different industries, from energy to manufacturing to commercial restaurants. My specific specialty is risk advisory, risk assessments, program development, and governance of security programs. Like I said, I participated with the GACC Colorado for the last several years. And finally, I'm we're one of the new members this year. We finally pulled the trigger and convinced my management to join. Previously, in my previous life, if you will, my previous employer, I oversaw facilities, several facilities in Germany, 2 near Frankfurt, Metzingen, Bellica, and up in Magdeburg. And of course, my family is from Paderborn area. That's my connection to Germany. And I have to plug my favorite Bundesliga team. I'm glad you're all on mute, because usually when I show that, people laugh. At least they do in Munich when you tell them you root for Paderborn. But thankfully, I can't hear you laughing. The last bullet there is the reason I joined, or I got my company to join, is obviously the business relationships, all the cultural events like Christkindlmarkt, and of course the beer. And as Peter mentioned earlier, we have a really good beer culture here in Colorado. So I think that's a good common ground. I don't think anybody would argue about that being a good common ground. Pinkerton does have, oh, I've got a slide on that. So we'll go forward here. A quick agenda here. I'm going to give a quick overview of Pinkerton, and then we'll talk a little bit of kind of a review on assets and security risk. And I think it's important to note that security risk is a subset of total risk. A lot of people in the business world obviously are familiar with risk in competition, market risk, the insurance market, worker safety, but physical security, IT security, those are also a kind of a subset of that. I'll also got 3 current trends, things we've seen over the last year, and some of the effects we'll talk about, and then a little bit about how to approach managing security risk in your firm. And my main purpose here is really to get you thinking about security, especially in ways that you may not have before. Security is one of those things that a lot of people take for granted. And this is really like I say, it's a presentation to get your creative juices and your thinking juices flowing. With that, I'll give you a quick overview of Pinkerton, the company. If the only thing that you've heard of Pinkerton is in the movies, you're definitely thinking about the right Pinkerton. We have a long history, been in business 171 years. We started in Chicago. We did foil an early plot on Abraham Lincoln's life. That was not, we were not on duty at Ford's Theater, though. Thankfully, that didn't happen on our watch. We hired the first female detective in the United States, and founded the Union Intelligence Service, which went on to become the forerunner of the Secret Service. In 1871, we created the first criminal database. Alan Pinkerton started to collect mugshots and newspaper clippings. And anybody have a guess? Mario, you know the answer. What was going on in Germany? A great year, 1871. This picture might help. It's the start of the German Empire. That's a picture of the German Empire being declared in Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. Just to put it into context. More recently, we have things, we've continued to innovate. We've got things like the Pinkerton Risk Index, which is risk across countries. Pinkerton Crime Index, which uses a lot of machine learning, big data to do predictive crime rankings down to the neighborhood level. And we continue to try to innovate in this area. We have offices worldwide. We operate in 150 plus countries. We're actually a subsidiary of the big firm Securitas AB. And our primary service areas are protection and response. This is protective agents for high-risk terminations or residential protection, travel protection. We also do investigations, due diligence, employee screening. We have a unit that does all that. We have a very robust intelligence arm that constantly scrubs the web and does forward-looking intelligence. And then we do, of course, assessment, advisory, and planning on security plannings and actual security management. So enough about Pinkerton. To talk a little bit about risk. And the first thing we have to talk about when we talk about risk is you have to know what you're protecting. A lot of people try to go into security. We see a lot of clients that try to go into security and spend money in security without really knowing exactly what they're protecting. And we like to group these things into people, property, and information. And not just your employees. When I talk about people, I'm talking also about people who might visit your sites, your customers, your suppliers, contractors, and even the larger community around your facilities. When we talk about property, we talk about not only the buildings and your capital equipment, but vehicles, raw materials and products, any cash, and of course the environment that's around your facility. And of course, the big one that lots of people talk about now, especially in the electronic and the IT world, is information. That's business information, personal information, competitive information, and of course, the secret sauce, your intellectual property. And all of these combine together to really protect the biggest asset of all, and what we try to focus on when we're looking at risk is protecting a company's reputation, because obviously a loss of any one of these assets can be a significant hit on your reputation. It can impact a company's ability to acquire funding, recruit the right people, and do business with their customers. So for every asset, when we talk about risk, we generally look at three aspects, three components. And these are threats against the asset. And in the world of security risk, we're generally talking about either human threats or natural forces like natural disaster, vulnerabilities of the asset, and then finally the consequences of loss of the asset. And it's helpful to look at this in an orderly manner, and look at this. You can look at across lots of domains. This is a tool that we use for looking at risk. And I put this up here because there's a lot of different risk, and there's also in each one of these quadrants and different broken out areas, there are places where we have security risk. Obviously, crime and violence is the one everyone thinks of right off the bat. But there is also in supply chain, and I'll talk a little bit about this in the context of COVID, but supply chain, you have to secure your supplies and your products going in and out of your location, especially with the international nature of many of the supply chains. With changes like COVID, they can cause supply chains to change, and goods get stored in new locations. So there's ample opportunity for different types of malfeasance to occur in the supply chain. Like I say, all of these areas can include aspects of security risk. The big thing about risk that people often forget is that it's not static. It changes with the time and location, and you have to go back and look at it on a regular basis. I can't tell you how many clients try to throw a solution at a security risk problem, and they put some money toward it, and they get invest in a system, and they never look at it again. It's just it becomes a very static thing that they continue to pour money into, and it may not, in a year later, it may not address the risk anymore. So that's just a quick overview of what we think of when we're thinking of security risk, and how to approach looking at security risk. And because risk changes, we're looking at some very interesting changes over the last over 2020, even from starting in 2019. I want to talk about those just a little bit. Obviously, the big one that everyone has thought about and experienced over the last year and a half, COVID-19. And we have lots of things that have changed because of that. We're all familiar with it. Working from home. This has definitely brought a lot more vulnerabilities in the cyber world as well as in the physical world. Now you have your employees working over their own connections to your systems, and those endpoints, their laptops or their computers are all only as secure as their homes. And so those are some interesting effects of that. We've also had a lot of reductions in workforce. I think everybody probably knows at least one person who's lost their job during this time. Those have caused an uptick in the stress. And that's, again, that's the next bullet, the increase in workplace violence that we've seen from increased stress, both internal in the case of what we call high-risk terminations or hostile terminations. We've done quite a few projects where clients have had to support high-risk terminations during COVID. And then also front of house, and that's just customers who are just much higher, experiencing a much higher level of stress and kind of lose their mind at some small what seem to be small items, like one of my most interesting examples is like DoorDash type drivers who come in to pick up food, and the food's not ready, and they literally stand on the counter and make death threats. You might scratch your head and say, "Oh, that never happens," but yes, it has happened. It happened last year several times. We've also seen an increase in need for supportive screening, contact tracing. You may have gone to some stores during some of the initial phases of COVID and seen security personnel helping maintain order, making sure people are getting screened for temperature and wearing masks, et cetera. Those are some additional things that we've seen come in as part of COVID. I mentioned supply chain disruption, having to travel different routes, use different modes, have different overnight storage locations. All of these require changes in security posture. Now we're starting to see the presence of counterfeit vaccines as well as vaccine documentation. And this from the security side standpoint, there's a lot of investigations that are done to trace down these types of counterfeits. And we also do, we'll do, I forget what they call them, large buys to try to return the counterfeit material to the producer. With COVID-19, we saw initially a very big decrease in crime all across the United States. We had the initial lockdowns, and that actually locked a lot of the criminals stayed home as well, apparently. But we've seen a steady rise back up as people have gotten used to it. Now, as we get ready to reopen, and as we were talking about earlier, things are starting to reopen. Everybody's excited about that, but that means change. We're going to have a lot more travel starting. Also events. We've seen some events start up here in Colorado already. Both of those, we generally see people working to secure travelers, duty of care for travelers traveling around the country and around the world, and of course event security, especially in the more politically charged era. If it's an event with any kind of controversial subject. And then finally, we're seeing employees returning to workplaces that have been vacant for a year or more, and people not remembering, not operating like they used to, and not being mindful of the security of that was in place before the lockdowns and working from home. All sorts of changes as in the security postures of companies and the security considerations due to COVID-19. Last year, along with that, we also saw social unrest. Actually, the Hong Kong protests, my first one on here, that actually started in 2019. That actually involved a lot of having to evacuate people from the protest areas. We were actually involved in a lot of helping people be extricated from offices, from locations in Hong Kong. Then we had the lockdown start, and then with the George Floyd case, we saw a lot of the BLM, Antifa, and anti-police protests that have cropped up and continue to this day. Now, I think probably about 6 months ago, we really started to see the anti-lockdown, anti-mask, anti-vaccine protests. Now the anti-vaccine and anti-mask are the big ones. And I think Germany is also seeing a lot of the anti-lockdown protests. In the US, of course, right around the election and the inauguration, during the winter, there were lots of protests. There were a lot of rallies, actions, all of this. Now we're seeing immigration-related protests, things being directed at ICE facilities. And the main thing about these, anybody who watches the news has probably seen these, but the main thing is they can happen near your workers and near your customers and near your facilities. In fact, your workers might even be involved in them. So yeah, you risk, there's risk there of workers and customers getting caught up in the riot. Obviously, damage to facilities and loss from looting. Just before this call, I had a client call that had gotten graffiti and all sorts of damage, broken windows and things to their facilities that's related to immigration related issues. Interruption of supply and distribution or services as areas are closed off, even temporarily, that can impact supply chains. As we saw with Basecamp recently, the company Basecamp had, if you're familiar, they put out an internal memo to tell all of their employees not to discuss politics and social justice issues in the workplace. The fact that these protests, this social unrest is going on has definitely caused an increased internal strife at locations, because people talk about these issues at the water cooler and over the coffee machine. I think we're going to see a lot more of this as people start coming back into the office. We've all been away for a year, and now people have formed opinions, and now we're all going to come back into the office together, and hopefully we can be civil. But unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. We're seeing a lot of relocation of facilities. If you think of Portland, there's a lot of people leaving the West Coast, Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Silicon Valley. Actually, there's a lot of companies relocating to Colorado out of Silicon Valley because of social unrest. Obviously, this can impact your company your reputation, and you can also have direct threats to management. We're seeing a lot of that when anybody in management posts an opinion or takes a stance on something on Twitter or Facebook. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't agree with that, and we see a lot of highly charged.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
We see a lot of highly charged postings that
Hello, and I'm muted.
That amount to threatening things. And the last one that I'd like to talk about is workplace violence. I told Mario that I Googled a German workplace violence, and I couldn't get any decent picture out of Google. And so I just had to pick one here. But there's definitely, and I think this is very germane for this group, because we have a lot of people who are used to doing business in Europe. And there are some very unique US factors. Obviously, even for people who are of German descent, European descent in this country, we've lived here a long time, and we definitely have some unique differences that contribute to and put a different spin on workplace violence. Obviously, the big one is firearms and related laws. I did a little search on statistics. Germany has about 0.2 firearms per person in Germany, and the US has 1.2, so about 5 times more guns on a per capita basis in the US. And of course, we have much less restrictive laws. That amounts to somewhere between 300 and 600 million guns in the United States. On top of that, we have fairly limited social programs when compared to Europe. We have our own unique employment law things, which generally allow people to be let go much easier than in Europe. You don't have a 6-week notice or a 6-month notice. It's maybe 2 weeks. And there's not the social program, the social safety net, if you will, like there is in Germany. We are a two-party political system, and that has become very polarized and led to what's called a cancel culture. So you see in the US more and more people getting off to the edges of the left or the right and not really wanting to hear what other people say. We also have a propensity for lawsuits in this country, and that affects everything, including the employment law and how we get rid of, fire, terminate, how we terminate employees, and how the rest of the company reacts to that. And underpinning all of this is of course, a fundamental difference in the understanding of the social contract. What we see here, especially in this current environment where we have become polarized, is employees that are hired that are poor fits, or even have a history of violence, and a lot of times this is done because of HR departments not doing a great job of looking into the history, doing background checks on their potential hirees. It's always obviously better to not hire a person than have them come in, start to get to feeling at home, and then have to be terminated because of something that you could have foreseen or found in their background. A lot of workplace violence is exacerbated by lack of protective measures of the facility, and also support programs within the HR department. We've seen a lot of terminations that are managed poorly. One of the things that I've been doing a lot of this last year is working with HR departments and HR managers to handle terminations so that they don't, as we say, go south. They don't become a workplace violence incident. The terminated employee moves off and is on his way to the next engagement without any kind of acrimony or especially violence. We do, obviously, with COVID and being locked down and all of the things going on, we see employees more and more unable to handle stress and conflict. And of course, customers, the same thing with customers. Service a product, they get angry. We see much more likelihood, many more cases of workplace violence over this last year and a half because of these things. So those were sort of 3 current trends, things that are going on in the US right now: the COVID, the social unrest, and the corresponding uptick in workplace violence. Mitigating these things, right? What's one thing to know about them and see them? How do you go about mitigating security risk? The first steps to take. As with any program, if you don't have the top brass to buy in, you're not going to have a successful program. You have to have top management buy-in. And this is essential because you have to give security the focus it deserves and it requires. Planned is always more efficient than response. And sometimes it's difficult in security because you have a successful program when nothing happens. And when nothing happens, sometimes it's hard to get funding from upper management. So it's tricky, but you have to be committed to doing it. It's also a cross-functional and long-term effort. Security is not something that you put a camera system in and you put some guards in at the front and you call it done. But you have to involve your HR departments, both on the recruiting side as well as on the termination side and everything in between. There's now a large nexus with IT departments regarding information security. Facilities departments for putting systems in, but it's definitely a long-term cross-functional effort. To start everything, start with a very sober assessment. As I showed earlier, make sure you know your assets, what you're protecting, and then look at the risks that really, truly are risks to those assets. And then you can prioritize your efforts and your funding. And then because things change, reassess periodically. Usually people will do a risk assessment every year or 2 years. That's what we recommend, but it's definitely not something, again, it's not one and done. It requires follow through. Don't get complacent. And then lastly, because it's probably not your core business, I always recommend engage a trusted partner for advice and services, someone who knows security, someone who specializes in all of the training of their personnel for security services. And then there's a trusted partner right there that just appeared, whose name just appeared. Yeah, so I also have counterparts in all across the Midwest. I have a counterpart in Chicago, in Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Detroit, also St. Louis. So if anybody on this call wants to talk further about this or wants to talk with their local Pinkerton rep, I can definitely plug you into those people. We specialize in local delivery, but global reach. And with that, I'll take questions.
We never sleep. That's a good line, actually, Stuart. Am I on mute, or can you hear me, Stuart? Okay, good.
I can hear you.
Usually, the first thing I have to check is, of course, I'm on mute. We never sleep. That's actually true for a company that's operating worldwide. Yeah. So, quick question on my end, Stuart. Thank you so much. There is one thing that I just wanted to know is you mentioned that you have 2,000 something employees worldwide. How many of those are in the States, or what's the team size? Because you also mentioned that you cover a quite large geographic region here in the States, based out of Colorado. So what's your team size here in your region or in the States?
I think in the States this is an educated guess, I'd say about 75% of our employees are in the US.
Awesome.
We probably have, the rest are probably evenly split between Mexico, South America, EMEA, and Asia.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And I also want to say hi to Rolf Kaufmann, who joined us a little later. Rolf, I'm sorry we mute everyone during the presentation, but welcome. Here we go now. With that, any questions? Anything that you want to know from Stuart Fischbeck?
Yeah, I had a question. So I kind of agree with you. I feel like through this whole past year, everything, or life in general, did get a little bit more risky. So are you seeing people taking this security type stuff more seriously, or is it a struggle? And are people just kind of hoping everything will resolve itself?
No, we're definitely seeing an uptick in business. Mm-hmm. We had, of course, immediately with the lockdowns, we all of our travel and event security essentially disappeared. But we still had a good year last year because of the uptick in all the other things. We've still been seeing a lot of responsive actions. And I think now we're actually starting to get more requests for proactive things, plans. People have seen some of the effects and they've been impacted in some way. And now they're starting to be a little more proactive.
And can you predict the future? Are there any big security risks coming down the pipeline?
No, I can't predict the future. That's an easy one. It's the big thing now is I think on everybody's mind is the cyber world. When it comes to, if you look at nation state actors, whether it's China, Russia, Iran, and they're not just preying on the US government, they're looking at companies that may make a defense or a high tech, a biotech company maybe. They're preying on that. And one of the interesting things about cybersecurity and information security in general is that most of the events in the cyber world happen because of a person and human behaviors, which is really more in the physical security world. It's either a nefarious actor, as we call them, somebody with malintent, or it's just someone who makes a mistake and gets careless. They've made lots of TV shows about things like that, where somebody is coerced or talked into given their password, for instance, or given the secrets. And I think that's coming, right? In some places, in some industries, it's already here. That would be my best bet.
No,
I have a question. It goes somewhat with what Mario asked you about the size of your company. So very interesting, Stu. Lots of areas of security that you get involved with, with a somewhat limited amount of people. How do you cover all these, expert areas? Do you work then with subcontractors, and your main expertise is to manage this, to make a risk assessment, and then find the right consultants or providers to do this, or do you truly provide all the services with your own employees?
Well, we have employees who provide all of these services, and unless you're talking about some of the more like phone forensics, for example. If we're doing an investigation and we need to do some forensics on a phone, that's something we don't have in-house and we contract out. Things on the IT side are usually contracted out. We generally have all of this, and it is a small group. We generally have the expertise, although we do use contractors in all areas to flex, if you will, as the business requires. I think it's always been considered very important to know and to be cutting edge on these different disciplines ourselves, because we're not going to trust an investigation to someone without having it overseen internally by someone who knows how to do an investigation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
To what I found interesting when we chatted for the first time, and also here, what I found interesting is usually when we talk about, or also in the membership in the companies, when we look at the risks, one usually focuses on the risks from the outside, supply chain disruption, logistic disruptions. So what I found very interesting is that you also, made us aware and put a finger on like, hey, have you already analyzed what kind of risks you already have inside of your company?
Right.
So that's what I found most interesting, because for me, that's, without you making me aware of that, I didn't even have that on the radar initially.
That's an often overlooked risk. Excuse me, the insider risk, and it can even be someone who is hired, when they're hired, they're not compromised, but then later on they become compromised in financially or some other way, and then they start letting secrets out, or they start embezzling, things like that, or other things. We've had some very interesting, I've had a client whose employees started using their equipment for personal business. We've had employees doing internal sabotage for personal gain. So it's the depravity of people never ceases to amaze me.
Great, thank you so much. Well, to the entire group, any other questions?
I think Jules had his hand up, right?
Yeah, I have one more question, Stuart. I'm also from Paderborn, by the way, also big SC Paderborn fan. So
Ausgezeichnet.
I was wondering, in what capacity do you use artificial intelligence to track employees or these kind of risks to mitigate this? I know kind of like what's going on in China a little bit from what I read through the media, so I'm thinking that must trickle into the industry as well. But do you use artificial intelligence for that? And yes,
we don't use
okay.
artificial intelligence for people tracking. We actually, where we use artificial intelligence a lot is in crime rate prediction. And I could do a whole nother presentation on our crime index. And there's a number of products out there. They're often used by management company, real estate companies, looking at different areas. It's a useful tool for if you're going to put a facility or an office in a location to understand the crime profile relative to other places. But we produce one that goes down to the neighborhood level, and it uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to comb through crime reports from all over the country. All of these police departments, sheriff's departments, also the FBI, they all have these on electronic databases now, and putting all those together in a data set using AI. And then we actually throw in game theory and actually look at competing theories of crime. And some of our analysts who are working on it, they actually have a monthly competition to see who can predict the crime the best. And so that's where we really do, and it is cutting edge in the world of crime. I hate to say crime prediction. I hate to use the word prediction, but it does give a trend of what crime is going to do in a certain area. And of course, you're learning from past things, right? With artificial intelligence, it's learning from what happened during COVID, right? What happened when social unrest broke out in this area. So it's all of that goes in and continues to make the prediction better. That's really where we use AI. When it comes to employee tracking, that's hard to do because most of our clients are companies, and there's a lot of privacy restrictions on things like that at this point. Most of that is done from the government level because they're able to do it. But a company, it's not. Most people haven't gotten into that yet. tracking their employees.
Do you get a lot of government contracts? I mean, I would assume that municipalities would be very interested in your crime reports and forecasts, or are you more competing with them?
You know, we get specialty work from municipalities. Sometimes we have gotten some police departments who are very interested in our crime reporting. It's a fairly new product that we've put out. The type of product's been in the industry for quite a while, but most of our things are real estate construction type businesses, as well as businesses that are looking to relocate.
The crime prediction part, Stuart, that you just mentioned, to me sounds a lot like Minority Report. Not sure if you know that movie. So.
Oh yeah.
Are we already there, or getting close, or?
No.
Exactly.
It's not down to the. It's not the person level.
Yeah.
It's intuitively, right? We all do that, right? When we look at a neighborhood and go, oh, that's a bad neighborhood because you see broken windows, right? You see homeless in the area, or things are left, they're not maintained. So we all do that predictively based on behaviors. We all do that, but to do it in a, all we're trying to do is do it in a very repeatable, defensible, and a like you with the AI, it's an ever improving prediction of which way the crime in the area is going.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, we're almost at the end of our time here. Any final questions that you have on your radar? If not, you saw Stu's contact details. Please get in contact with him directly. Stu, if you just want to show them again, but otherwise we can share them as well. There you go. So give Stu a call or send an email if there's things you need to discuss that are not for public consumption, which in this case here with the topic, I would completely understand. Thank you so much, Stu, for that very interesting presentation. It's always great to have those specialists here in our membership network. Colorado Chapter, kudos that you have those companies over there as well, and that we provide the attractive network for you to join, Stu. So I know that you joined a few of the events that we have in Colorado and here, and then that made you, join the chamber. So all good on that one. Before we go and before I let you go, just a final announcement. Next week is going to be a packed Thursday. So if you're interested, in the morning until the afternoon, participate in our SME forum, all topics for small and mid-sized enterprises and companies here in the United States, ranging from marketing, HR, finances, industrial Internet of Things, and all the things. And if you're exhausted after that, then the Colorado chapter has their roundtable series Life-Work Balance later that day in the evening. So look it up on our websites, look into the events calendar, and then hope to see you soon in one of our events or at one of our events. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.